Imagine you're in this scientific landscape where two completely separate fields, I'm talking neuroscience, studying actual brains, and computer science, building AI, they start to land on the exact same conclusions.
And that phenomenon, that stunning convergence between the mechanics of a brain and the architecture of a machine, that's really why cognitive science even exists.
Right.
We're sort of at the intersection. We're in this unique spot to translate insights from AI breakthroughs into new theories about the mind and, vice versa. It's a genuinely symbiotic relationship.
It absolutely is. And we've been deep in the source material for this one. Excerpts from a key chapter on machine learning and AI. And the story that emerges is all about that convergence. It's a series of these aha moments where the silicon starts to mirror the gray matter. So our mission today is to really distill this material for you. We want to give you a shortcut to the three top kind of big ideas that define this relationship between the natural and the artificial.
Gets you the core knowledge, but efficiently.
Exactly. We'll cover the history, the structures, and the learning mechanisms. Okay, let's unpack this.
To set the stage, you have to understand that AI development isn't. It's not a straight line. Since the 50s, the field has been cycling between these opposing ideas about what intelligence fundamentally is.
And these cycles directly influence how we think about human intelligence, too.
They absolutely did. They reflect and then in turn influence our own theories. So we're going to trace that path first.
All right, let's dive into big idea one. This huge foundational shift from thinking about intelligence as just a set of logical rules to seeing it as, well, an adaptive learning process.
This takes us right back to what's called the symbolic approach. This was the dominant idea in AI from, say, the 1950s all the way through the 70s.
And the premise was that intelligence is just logical reasoning.
Exactly. The human mind was basically seen as an information processor, a biological computer. And knowledge was these explicit symbols that you could manipulate with very strict handwritten rules.
Which sounds, from a certain point of view, very compelling. You just list the steps for making a decision. If you can define intelligence, you can program it.
That's right. And that thinking led to the creation of expert systems in the 70s and 80s. They were designed to mimic a human specialist.
And they were a big deal at first.
A huge deal. The most famous example, which really shows both the promise and the ultimate crisis of that whole era, is a system called MYCM.
Okay, tell us about MYCIN. Why did it work, but also why did it ultimately fail that bigger test of general intelligence?
So MYCIN was developed at Stanford. Its one job was to diagnose bacterial infections and then recommend treatments. Researchers spent ages interviewing infectious disease experts, and they encoded all that knowledge into thousands of if-then rules.
Can you give an example of a rule?
Sure. A rule might be something like, if the patient have a high fever and a specific bacteria is found in their blood culture, then you should consider treatment X.
And I've read that within its tiny, specific area, it was shockingly effective.
Yeah.
Sometimes even better than human doctors.
It was. But that success came with a fatal flaw. The systems were what we call brittle.
Brittle, meaning?
Meaning they only worked inside their explicitly defined box. If you, the user, asked a question in a slightly different way, or if you asked MYCIN, this world-class infection expert, to, look at a broken bone on an X-ray,
You would have no idea.
it would become instantly and just spectacularly useless. It had zero common sense.
So the crisis here wasn't really about a lack of computing power. It was about the nature of knowledge itself.
Precisely. This whole experience forced researchers to face the fact that most of what we know, common sense, intuition, how to ride a bike, it's all implicit, it's tacit. You can't just write it down in a set of if-then statements.
Right.
The symbolic approach was just fundamentally limited because the world is messy and our intelligence is built to adapt to that messiness.
So that failure, that moment, the field realized that knowledge has to be learned instead of just being programmed. That's what paved the way for the connectionist approach.
And that's where neural networks come back into the picture. The idea of systems that learn patterns from data, kind of like how connections get stronger between neurons in your brain.
But there was a bit of a lull, right? The AI winter.
There was. The early connectionist systems just didn't have the processing power. But that lull takes us right into the deep learning renaissance, which really kicks off after 2006. This was the real game changer.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just one thing. It was three separate forces all converging at once to make deep learning actually work. What were they?
Okay, so first, you had the explosion of big data. The internet just gave us oceans of digitized information to learn from.
Right.
Second, you had new algorithmic tricks, things like RailU and Dropout. that finally let us train really deep networks without them breaking.
But that third piece, the hardware, is the one everyone talks about now, the raw power of GPUs. Why were graphics cards the key that unlocked modern AI?
Because the math at the core of a neural network is just massive parallel matrix multiplication. And GPUs, which were designed to render video games by doing millions of calculations at once, were perfect for it.
They were custom built for the job without anyone realizing it.
Exactly. All that parallel processing power finally gave researchers the horsepower they needed to train these huge networks on billions of data points.
And the big "I told you so" moment, the proof that this whole new paradigm worked, came in 2012 at the ImageNet competition.
Yes, that was the moment. A model called AlexNet delivered this revolutionary leap in image recognition accuracy. It wasn't just a little better, it was a completely different class of performance that the old hand-coded systems couldn't even touch.
Okay, so that brings us to big idea 2, convergence in visual processing. This might be the most striking example of all. We're talking about convolutional neural networks, or CNNs.
CNNs are the workhorses of pretty much all modern computer vision, and they're built on a principle called hierarchical processing.
So they don't just look at an image and see cat, they break the problem down.
They break it down into a sequence of layers. Each layer learns an increasingly complex and abstract representation of the data.
So if we could actually look inside a working CNN, what would we see happening layer by layer?
It's like an assembly line. The very first layers, the ones closest to the image, they're super simple. They're only detecting things like horizontal edges, vertical edges, maybe a simple color gradient.
Just the most basic building block.
Well, most basic. Then the middle layers start combining those little pieces to form more complex features. Things like curves or textures, or maybe the shape of an eye or the curve of a car's fender.
And then the final layers, the deepest ones.
Those are the ones that put it all together. They synthesize everything from the previous layers to recognize a whole object, a specific person's face, a particular model of car, or, yes, a cat.
And this artificial hierarchy, which was just built by engineers trying to solve a problem efficiently, this is what caused the scientific shockwave.
It is.
Because it's an almost perfect functional parallel to the architecture of the primate visual system, a system that evolved over millions of years.
It's an incredible parallel. In a biological brain, visual information from your eyes goes first to a place called the primary visual cortex, or V1.
Okay.
And V1 is famous among neuroscientists because its neurons are selective for, you guessed it, simple features like edges and orientations, just like the first layers of a CNN.
And from V1, the information gets passed down a chain to V2, V4.
And eventually it ends up in the inferotemporal cortex.
Yeah.
And that's the specialized part of the brain that handles high-level object and face recognition. That's a cat area.
The same job as the final layers of the CNN.
The very same. And when scientists compared the firing patterns in a fully trained CNN to actual neural recordings from a monkey's visual cortex while it was looking at images, the similarities were just profound.
Now, is the analogy perfect? I mean, the human visual system seems so much more flexible. We can handle weird angles or new objects way better than a standard CNN.
That is a really important point. The analogy is strongest when you talk about the basic functional architecture. Both systems use this efficient hierarchical breakdown of patterns. But you're right, the human system is vastly more complex. It has feedback loops, attention mechanisms, things AI is still struggling to replicate well. Still, the convergence suggests something really deep, that there might be a kind of universal computational strategy for robust pattern recognition, that if you're building a system to see things in a messy world, whether it's out of silicon or neurons, this is just the best way to do it.
Okay, that brings us to our third and final big idea. We're moving from seeing the world to learning how to act in it. We're talking about reinforcement learning, or RL, and its own stunning biological connection.
Reinforcement learning is the framework behind systems that learn through trial and error. They try to take actions in an environment to maximize some kind of cumulative reward.
And the mathematical core that makes this all work is something called the prediction error.
It is the absolute heartbeat of the system. A prediction error is simply the difference between the reward you expected to get and the reward you actually got.
So it's more than just knowing you were wrong. It's a signal for how to get better.
It's a directional signal.
Yeah.
It tells a system precisely how to adjust. If you take an action and get a reward that was bigger than you expected, that's a positive prediction error. The system learns to do that again.
And if you expect a big reward and get nothing,
That's a negative prediction error. The system learns to avoid whatever it just did.
What is so fascinating here, and what the source material really hits on, is that this abstract mathematical idea is physically represented by a specific chemical in the brain.
Yes. The convergence with the dopamine system is maybe the deepest piece of evidence we have for a shared principle. Dopamine neurons, especially the ones in the midbrain, fire in patterns that precisely match these prediction errors.
Walk us through this scenario. What's actually happening in the brain when a prediction error occurs?
Okay, so imagine you train a monkey to expect a little sip of juice after it hears a specific sound. The dopamine neurons fire when the juice arrives, as expected.
Right.
But then you surprise the monkey. You deliver the juice earlier than it expected. In that moment, its dopamine neurons burst with activity. That's a positive prediction error. It's the brain screaming, "Hey, that was better than I thought. Update the model."
And the reverse, if the juice doesn't come.
If the monkey hears the sound, expects the juice, and gets nothing, the firing rate of those same dopamine neurons drops way below its normal baseline. A negative prediction error. The brain is signaling, "That was worse than expected. Adjust your expectations downward."
So you have a biological chemical signal that is performing the exact same mathematical function as the optimization algorithm in our most advanced AIs.
It's incredible. It suggests that evolution and human engineers independently stumbled upon the same optimal solution for how an intelligent agent should learn from consequences.
And this has huge implications for those old nature versus nurture debates in psychology.
It really does, because deep learning provides a kind of computational proof that you don't necessarily need a bunch of pre-programmed innate cognitive modules to get complex behaviors.
Meaning things like vision or language don't have to be hard-coded from birth.
Exactly. These incredibly complex, domain-specific abilities can actually emerge from a very general learning mechanism like prediction error, as long as it's exposed to enough rich, structured data. It changes the debate from how much is innate to what kind of general learning architecture is innate.
That is the big takeaway, isn't it? AI isn't just a tool, it's a parallel laboratory for understanding intelligence. Okay, let's wrap this up. We need to consolidate the essential learning outcomes for quick recall. If you only remember 4 things from this deep dive, make it these.
Okay, first, the great AI pivot. We learned that intelligence isn't just logic. The failure of rule-based systems like MYCIN proved most human knowledge is tacit, and it paved the way for the data-driven success of connectionism and deep learning.
Second, the visual blueprint. Artificial systems like CNNs process images using a hierarchy of features, from simple edges to whole objects. And this structure directly mirrors the primate visual system from V1 to the inferotemporal cortex.
Third, the universal learning signal. The core concept of prediction error in reinforcement learning isn't just math. It is physically and temporally mirrored by the firing patterns of dopamine neurons in the brain.
And fourth, the emergence of competence. We now have computational proof that complex abilities can emerge from general learning rules when they're fed enough data. This suggests that our development might be more about having the right adaptive architecture than having lots of pre-programmed knowledge.
Now, even with all these amazing convergences, it is crucial to talk about the gaps. The limitations of AI are just as important for understanding what makes human cognition unique.
So what are the biggest gaps that still separate AI from human-level intelligence?
I'd say there are 3 big ones. The first is data efficiency. A human can learn a new concept from just 1 or 2 examples. An AI needs thousands, sometimes millions.
Right.
Second is common sense reasoning. And the third, and this is the really hard one, is genuine causal understanding.
Causal understanding, that's a huge distinction. AI is a master of correlation. It can tell you A and B always happen together, but it has no idea why.
Exactly. And AI is brilliant at spotting that umbrella sales go up when the weather is cold. A human knows that neither one causes the other. There's a third thing, rain, that causes both. AI struggles to grasp those what-if scenarios. If I do this, what will happen? That deep, flexible, causal model of the world is, for now, uniquely human.
So at the end of the day, this isn't really a conversation about competition. It's about exploring the very limits of what intelligence can be.
By studying the achievements and the constraints of both systems, the biological and the artificial, we expand our understanding beyond the one example that evolution gave us. We're essentially exploring the space of possible minds.
And that, for you, is the profound payoff of this deep dive. A clearer view of what it means to be intelligent. No matter if you're built from carbon or from code, what insights will you connect from these convergences?